Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. It is Jackstown. So guys, if you're a baseball fan and you were asked who is the greatest catcher in Major League history, there's a lot of names you can throw out there. A lot of people might say Johnny Bench is the greatest catcher of all time. You might say Mike Piazza's in that conversation, or Pudge Rodriguez, or maybe even for the more modern fans, maybe Yadier Molina, Buster Posey, and Joe Mauer maybe are in the conversations. And those are all great catchers, but I think the greatest catcher of all time is the person we're going to talk about in today's video, who I think over the years historically has been completely forgotten. And when you just look at his numbers and the type of player he was and the stories about him, it's really a foregone conclusion that, in my opinion, he clearly is the best catcher of all time, and a lot of baseball fans don't know about him. The only way you know about him is if you're a really hardcore baseball fan, or you've come from a family of several generations of baseball fans who have told the stories of this guy, because unfortunately he really is forgotten. A lot of people don't know this guy. Most casual baseball fans, I bet you, have never heard of him. So I think for today's video, it's only fitting that we talk about this guy that has been forgotten, because I think he deserves to be recognized and be at the level of the greatest players of all time. So let's dive into who this player is in particular. Okay, so the player we're talking about in particular today is Josh Gibson. So here we have his Baseball Reference page. Baseball Reference, I think, is the best website to look up any player, because it talks about everything you need to know about them and all their stats and advanced stats. Pretty much anything you want to know about a player, it's right here on Baseball Reference. So here we have Josh Gibson, right? So it says here at the positions, he was a catcher, outfielder, and first baseman, but he played most of his games at the catcher position. He bats right-handed, and he also throws right-handed. Okay, so then we look at his size. 6'1", 220 pounds, which is huge for a catcher, because a lot of catchers nowadays, or just historically, they're kind of shorter, maybe under 6 feet tall, and definitely not 220 pounds. So he's definitely very large for a catcher, and from the stories I've heard that a lot of it's muscle. He's just really strong. He's a big guy, had a huge upper body, big shoulders, and had a good throwing arm. So for most baseball fans, you know this, that being a catcher is more than just your offensive numbers, obviously. Actually, it's the position where I think defense matters the most, because most of the time catchers, after the pitchers, if you're in the National League, they're usually the worst offensive player on a team. So if you have a catcher who defends well, frames pitches well, throws well, and is a good leader and pitch caller behind the plate, then he's overall a very valuable member of a team. But if he hits really well and he's a really good offensive player, that's just a great bonus. So first and foremost, Bill James, who's a popular baseball writer, if you haven't heard of him, he's pretty much the father of sabermetrics, which are more advanced stats in baseball, like wins above replacement. He wrote in one of his books that Josh Gibson was a great defender, had a great throwing arm, was good at framing, and just everything defensively you want as a catcher, he was really good at, and then super strong. But then we're going to dive into his offensive numbers in a second, which pretty much blow everyone else's numbers away at the catcher position and most other positions. Just wait until you see. But first and foremost, we're just going to look into more about his bio. He was born on December 21st, 1911 in Buena Vista, Georgia, and he died in 1947. Unfortunately, he was only 35 years old, and so, you know, he played a long time ago. He played in the Negro Leagues, never played in the Major Leagues, which is one reason I think he's forgotten, that even though the Negro Leagues were a professional league, they weren't obviously in the spotlight compared to Major League Baseball. They weren't that big, they weren't nearly as popular, obviously. So that's one reason why he's forgotten. And then he was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 1972. Okay, so at least the Hall of Fame committee did induct him. If he wasn't inducted in the Hall of Fame, I would have been super upset. So then we look at his accomplishments here on the side, on the right-hand side here. We have Hall of Fame, okay, 2-time Triple Crown. And that, if you don't know, Triple Crown is when you lead your league in batting average, home runs, and runs batted in, which is an incredible accomplishment for a hitter. Honestly, if you win a Triple Crown, it's probably more impressive than winning an MVP. And then he was a 12-time All-Star, 2-time World Series champion, so he was a winner. His contributions contributed more than just stats. He led his team to victory. He was a winner, which is really important, I think, obviously. And then you have a 3-time batting champion, so led the league in batting average 3 times. So we're going to dive into his numbers in a second, guys. You're going to be blown away. Okay, so the way Baseball Reference formats their numbers is if you led your league in a certain statistical category, it's the font is bolded. So you're about to see, if something is in bold print, that means he led the league in that statistical category in that season. So ready for this, guys? Okay, here we go. Look at this. Oh my God, look how many bold bold font print, whatever you want to call it. Look how many things are in bold. That's incredible. Look at this. From 1933, okay, all the way down to 1938, he led the entire league in home runs, RBIs, and home runs and RBIs 6 straight years, okay? But look how many other things he led the league in. Runs, okay? He led the league in on-base percentage several times, slugging several times, on-base plus slugging several times. All these advanced stats, batting average. I mean, look at these numbers. Now, the second reason I think that his contributions are unrecognized, he's pretty forgotten for most baseball fans, is not only was he not in the spotlight of Major League Baseball, he did play in the Negro Leagues, obviously, but the problem with the Negro Leagues is that they didn't play that many games per season. So look at this. He's never played in more than 69 games in a season. He never even played 70 games. But so even though it's a smaller sample size, and you might think, well, if it's a smaller sample size, so if he played in 162 games, his numbers wouldn't be as good. Okay, but he played in almost 600 games as a major leaguer. And then if you take the average of everything that he's done, compile it together, and put it into a 162 game average, that means in a 162 game stretch, he's hitting 45 homers, 196 runs batted in, 11 stolen bases, which is really good for a catcher. Most catchers are not fast. He was a good base runner, okay? 166 runs, 374 batting average, 458 on base. I mean, these are ridiculous numbers, and let alone that it's a catcher. Ridiculous offensive numbers for anyone, and it's coming from a catcher. So it's a catcher whose offensive numbers blow away any other catchers, okay? He was a really good defender, and from the stories that I've heard and read, he was viewed as clearly the best catcher of his time and maybe the best player of his time, and it was just, he was a superstar in the Negro Leagues. But obviously, like I said, you don't get the same spotlight as you do in the major leagues, especially since he never made it to the major leagues. So that's why he's forgotten, but he shouldn't be, because this is just legendary stuff. His stats are legendary. They're just ridiculous, and combined with the fact that he was a great defensive player, I think he deserves a video honoring him, because he did some amazing things, and a lot of people don't consider him. I personally think, after looking through his numbers, looking through the fact that he was a winner, won 2 World Series, and seeing that he was a great defender, pretty much did everything right, everything well, and the stories that are told about him, the legends that are told about him, I think he's definitely, in my opinion, the greatest catcher in baseball history, not Major League history, because he didn't make it there. But I think he's the greatest catcher of all time, and pretty much everyone, or most people, forget about him. Like I said, unless you're a hardcore baseball fan, you probably didn't know him coming. I'm sure there's many of you watching who have never heard of this guy, but you should, because he's one of the greatest players, I think, of all time. I think if he made it to the major leagues, he would have been one of those timeless players like Babe Ruth or Lou Gehrig, where even though he may have played almost 100 years ago, it's one of those names that just transcends any era. He would have been one of the great names of all time, but obviously he never got that chance, unfortunately. But he definitely deserves to be mentioned and definitely should not be forgotten at all. I think he's the greatest catcher of all time, like I said. So that's going to do it for today's video, guys. I just wanted to make this because I thought he definitely deserved a video about himself. The great Josh Gibson. You guys should remember his name if you haven't heard of him already. And so let's just honor the legend that he is. So that's going to be it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you're a sports fan, you like sports like baseball, you might want to consider subscribing if you haven't already. I think you would like the channel. And like the video if you enjoyed the video. It's up to you. You know, I'm not forcing you to do anything. But that's going to be it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.